very positive, and that's Brazil's performance in the game that just wrapped against Paraguay in Las Vegas. Brazil were up 3-0 at the half. 2 goals from Vinicius Jr. plus 1 from Savio. Second half got to a good start actually for Paraguay. Alderete with an absolute banger to make it 3-1. Paquetá then converted from the penalty spot in the 65th minute. He'd missed a penalty earlier. Cubas was sent off for Paraguay in the 83rd minute. And the final score there in Las Vegas, Brazil 4, Paraguay 1. For more on this, let's welcome in the aforementioned Gustavo Hofman. I want you guys to know Gustavo and I played football together on the fields of Qatar back during the World Cup, so he's a good friend of the program. Okay. Gustavo, I can only imagine the last few weeks have been filled with tension for you following this Brazilian team. What's your reaction to the performance we just saw here, 4-1 over Paraguay?
Hello, Seb, Kasey, Hercules. It's a pleasure to be with you. Well, I think that for me, the most important thing today was the attitude, completely different from the first game against Costa Rica. These players were under high pressure. They really were under high pressure from the Brazilian fans, from the Brazilian press after the draw with Costa Rica. And today I saw a completely different team talking about attitude. So for me, this was the most important thing. Players were pressing high, moving the ball quickly. It was a completely different team. And individually, talking about them, VINI Jr. What the Brazilian fans expect is to see at the Brazilian national team the Vinicius Jr. who plays for Real Madrid as the protagonist, as the player who wins Champions League matches for Madrid. And today we also saw that. We saw Vinicius Jr. playing as a protagonist, playing with high confidence from the first minute to the end. So today was a really, really good match for Brazil. Of course, that they must improve. It was only the game number 6 for Brazil with Dorival Jr. So there's much space to improve. But what we saw today was very good.
How much better, Herc, were Brazil today than what we saw in the opener?
Night and day. Night and day. Not just because they finished off the opportunities, but the excitement. This was a different Brazil. Certainly, Paraguay have their deficiencies, but this Paraguayan team was a team that defended well. In World Cup qualifying, they've only given up 3 goals in 6 games. You can say what you want about them attacking. They've only scored 1 goal. They're very dependent on a Julio Enciso or Miguel Almiron. But when it comes to defending, this is a very difficult team to break down. And Brazil broke them down any and which way they wanted to. And especially from outside, whether it was Savio or it was Vinny Jr. And you're absolutely right. This is the Vinny Jr. that everybody wants to see. The Vinny Jr. that Real Madrid gets to see every week, week in and week out. Can he be that player with Brazil? He had 3 goals coming into this game. His last goal was over a year. You saw the best of Vinny today. And even when you thought he was going to be off his, how can I say it? Mentally not sharp. Okay? Because you know how players can get under Vinny's skin. He didn't let it get under his skin. He used it as fuel, and he picks up 2 goals. Albeit circumstantial goals, but you create those opportunities, and he did. This was a very different team than they faced Costa Rica, which is very dependent on, just half chances and just being, I guess, good in between the boxes, but very dull when it mattered. This was night and day performance.
The first goal, Kasey, doesn't fall till the 35th minute. Up until then, and including the missed penalty, it kind of felt like Brazil might be headed for another 0-0 like that against Costa Rica. And then once that goal falls for Vinny, just totally different.
Yeah, you could tell they needed something to kind of spark this tournament, get rid of the controversies from the game against the United States, and then to be able to see if can they kick on a little bit. And when they got the goal, it almost was like, the pressure that Gustavo was talking about just kind of disappeared. And then they were able to play with a little more freedom, continue to put Paraguay under more pressure. And in doing that, then they created more of the opportunities, which they took advantage of. I'm still a little nervous about this Brazilian side, that at times I still feel like a ball will go out wide and somebody will get in possession and everyone will stand around and watch as that person tries to dribble and do tricks and do something. But when they're combining, when they're moving together, doing little 1-2s at the top of the box and finding spots, then it looks like the Brazil we want to see. And I think if they can find that cohesiveness and learn to work more together as opposed to I'm going to show you how individually skilled I am, when they can get rid of that and get into more of the team play, which we saw at times today, I think then they might really start to put some fear in some teams.
Gustavo, what do you think of what Kasey's saying? What's your big worry when it comes to Brazil?
Well, I think that, as I said, it's only the sixth game with Dorival Jr. as the head coach. So this team is improving. This team is learning to play with Dorival. Dorival must believe much more in some players. Vinicius is an example of that. When you sack a player like Vinicius in the middle of the second half in the opener against Costa Rica, you send a message. You send a message that you don't really believe at him. So I think that Dorival must know much more their players. He must work a lot with them. One more point that I liked today was the involvement of Bruno Guimarães and Lucas Paquetá, offensively talking. And about what Kasey said, I think that Brazil should work much more collectively. You cannot only expect that Vinicius win the games for you, that Rodrigo makes some incredible plays, Endrick leaving the bench and making some magical play also. So you have to be stronger collectively, but you're gonna be stronger training with Mets, and you need time. You don't get better from one day to the other with a new coach. So I think that this Brazilian team needs time. Of course, that now is playing Copa America, and Brazil always plays for the title. And this is the pressure, and everybody knows how the pressure works in Brazil. But I think that Dorival needs time to work with this team and believe and know much more some players.
Interesting he mentions Paquetá and Guimarães. We've been saying, if there's one thing that doesn't feel like the old Brazil, which you might say today they did look like the old Brazil, it was the midfield. And interesting that he points out those two guys as guys who played well tonight.
Yeah, they played well tonight, but the true test will be when they face Colombia. Paraguay in this tournament, they're coming off a loss versus Colombia, where they presented some difficulties to Colombia, but also got ran off the field at times versus Colombia. Now you're going to see if they can maintain the same type of intensity, the same type of style and play, collective unit in that offensive third. I saw at times this Brazilian team where they wanted to connect, where you were seeing whether it was Vini or Savio try to connect to the middle with Paqueta and get that ball back and look to combine in that final third, and it would just look a bit off. It looked like what Gustavo was saying. They still need time under Dorival Jr. to get there, but certainly they will need to be better against a very good very good Colombia team. So they did well today. Granted, very limited in the midfield Paraguay team.
But a step forward.
Enough.
But a step forward.
Yeah, it's enough.
Yeah.
But we're going to see the real test when it comes to Colombia.
Correct.
Gustavo, can I ask you about the manager? His name keeps coming up, Dorival Jr. Here in the United States, there's a lot of pressure right now on Greg Berhalter, the manager. There's a lot of pressure on any of the managers in this tournament. What's the sensation around Brazil? Is there a lot of faith in Dorival Jr.?
Well, after everything that happened in 2023, with Fernando Diniz, everything going wrong, with the CBF waiting for Carlo Ancelotti, I think that now everybody must have faith in Dorival Jr. And actually, there is no pressure over Dorival Jr. about sacking him, anything like that. No. Nobody thinks about that. And I think that everybody knows that he needs time. He's a very good coach, but he was never an international coach. You know, he doesn't have the size of Carlo Ancelotti or any big coach in the world. He was a very known coach working in Brazil with Brazilian clubs, also working very well in Copa Libertadores. But this is his major work in his life. And also something curious today, and a sad news. During the match, his uncle, who was a Palmeiras legend, a very famous Brazilian player from the 6th and 7th, he was the uncle of Dorival Jr. He died during the match, and Palmeiras informed that during the match. So I think that for now he already knows about this sad news, but just to inform. But anyway, as I said, there is no pressure to sack Dorival Jr. or anything like that.
Can I ask you guys about the penalty, the missed penalty from Paquetá? I'm sure Kasey, as a goalie, you have some thoughts on that.
I'm never a fan of the hop, skip, jump around. Just have some confidence in yourself. Step up, know what you're going to do, and slam it in a corner and beat the goalkeeper. I think he thought too much of it. I think when the goalkeeper didn't flinch, and then he thought he had to get kind of more, I think, cute in trying to put it in that upper corner. It hurt him. Oh, look, I love that they had the confidence in him to give it to him again. and say, hey, finish it this time. He still kind of did the same little routine, but at least he put it away.
When you look at this Brazil side, Herc, what's your potential weakness? What's your worry point?
Well, the experience. The talent pool. We spoke about the Brazilian teams of the past, just the amount of players playing at a high level who are very free-flowing, very much in the DNA of what is Brazilian football. I look at this team, and there's a few players here that scream Brazilian football DNA. Your VINI Juniors, your Endrick, Rodrigo, your Savio, Rafinha. But then you look at the rest of the roster from the midfield on, it gets robotic to the outside backs, and you think you went from a Roberto Carlos to Marcelo to Dani Alves and Cafu to now a Wendell or Danilo. Certainly that pipeline has dried up. That's my worry is when you look at some of the other teams in this tournament, Colombia, who's riding high on 25-game unbeaten streak, to Argentina, who are defending world champions and have, oh, by the way, Messi on that roster, or even an Uruguay right now, this high-flying one, Marcelo Bielsa. My worry for this team is they don't have the pool of players to compete with some of these teams that I just mentioned.
Yeah, I look at two guys. Who, look, time's undefeated. It catches up to all of us eventually. But I look at two guys centrally, particularly when then you spread young players around them. Thiago Silva, Casemiro. Two guys that you could put and have that experience that can then say, you come here, you tuck in here, you go there, and then the instant respect of those young players to go, yep, I'll do that.
Yeah, and right now, like a Militao, who's a very good player, but coming off an ACL injury, how does that translate?
But put him next to a veteran legend to then let him transition into what he's going to become.
Costa Rica didn't have a single shot on target against Brazil. Paraguay had their moments today. They created some danger. When you look at it, Gustavo, how confident are you in this Brazilian back line as they move on and are obviously going to be playing better and better competition? It's Colombia next, and beyond that, the knockout rounds.
Yeah, what Kasey said about Thiago Silva and Casemiro. Brazil is really living some kind of transition from some old leaders, like also Neymar. Neymar is a technical leader. He's not the leader, a leader like Thiago Silva and Casemiro, but Brazil, of course, that misses Neymar. So when I said that Vinicius Jr. today played as a protagonist, it connects with this point because Brazil needs new leaders. Brazil needs some players who in the field will say, you move here, calm down, take it easy. Danilo is one of these leaders, but he's not the kind of player like Thiago Silva and Casemiro, who's always speaking, talking to the players. So I think that this kind of transition is going to be tough for Brazil. We also need to get the best from Rodrigo. I think that we still didn't see the best of Rodrigo at this Copa America. So this Brazilian team can improve, and we'll leave some tough moments with these kind of situations. And about the match against Colombia, against Costa Rica and Paraguay, we knew that these teams would play defensively against Brazil. Against Colombia, normally, the Brazilian game, it connects more with the Colombian game. You have normally an open game with more chances for both teams. So Brazil normally against Colombia has more space to create an attack.
What do you guys think? Open game favors who?
Colombia.
Why?
I just think they're a more balanced team. You look at them in World Cup qualifying, you look at them in this tournament, you look at their overall record in the last 25 games. The majority of those are wins, coming off 9 straight wins. And the level of the players right now, Luis Diaz, who looked very, very good. James Rodriguez, who looks like the James Rodriguez of old, just firing on all cylinders. I think if you look at the lines, they have more talented equilibrium throughout the lines. More equilibrium, so I should say, throughout the lines than a Brazil do. So if you were going to play an open game, I think Colombia has that edge where they could defend openly better and attack you better.
Well, I think Gustavo makes a point, is that this is a Brazilian team in transition, trying to figure out who the next leaders are, the next stars are, the next the next Brazilian super team is going to be. And we're seeing a Colombia team right now that's in championship form. Can they finish it off?
Right.
The test will be against Brazil to see if everything that Herc just said is true. Are they better across the board, or is Brazil finally starting to get their feet?
I know historically Brazil would obviously be the favorite here, but we deal on realistically what we've seen over the last 5 to 6 months, and that tells us, especially even over the last couple games, Colombia would be the favorite. Back home in Brazil, Gustavo, what are they saying? Do they expect Brazil to beat Colombia, or do they realize that Brazil is in a down moment and Colombia is in a very high moment?
Nobody in Brazil expects Brazil to lose, ever.
That true, Gustavo?
Never. People in Brazil really expect that people in Brazil expect that Brazil always win anything. And we don't win the World Cup since 2002. So you can imagine the pressure over these players. So in Brazil, for the people, the press, anybody really expect against Colombia another win from Brazil. But me as a journalist, looking what is happening with the Brazilian team, looking what is happening with the Colombian team, I know that's gonna be a very tough match, and that Colombia is playing very well with their players with so much confidence. Luis Diaz is playing so well. So James Rodriguez, when he plays for São Paulo in Brazil, he doesn't look even closer the player who he is with Colombia.
No matter what happens, Brazil are probably going through.